Um, so for the recording in the stream, um, the question was, how do you balance enemies coming in from that are spawning in when you're doing random spawning of enemies rather than scripted entry of enemies? And so what I was saying is that you could spawn them in within category classes. So you say this is a spawn location for types 1s and 2s, and so, and it will be 50-50. You can create a list of probabilities of each type of enemy being spawned. You can then balance that out to say, well, these are the probabilities, and then I will sum all of the damage they can do and see if it's outside the range that I want, and I'll just throw away any selection that fits outside the range. You can create kind of vignettes, and so the idea is that that like a heavy and 3 lights is an interesting couple to spawn, and so what you do is you don't randomly spawn each of the units, you spawn that as a patrol, as a cohort, and so you create 10, 15 patterns of combinations of enemies. Potentially don't spawn them all at once, spawn them in sequence, but you have that 10 to 20 different acceptable and interesting patterns, and then you, instead of randomly having them spawn, you randomly choose one of those sequences and spawn that sequence, right? Now, even if you do some relatively simple things, like if you have 2 units of equal strength, randomize which one you spawn in that sequence, makes it feel like it's much more random, right? Because they're not seeing exactly the same thing all the time. They're just saying the same amount of damage being done or the same sequence. You can also rearrange parts of that sequence and play with it. So the idea is that you are still having some amount of randomness. Now, very interestingly, Sudoku, so hopefully some of you played Sudoku. Sudoku, randomly generating Sudokus is super easy, but they didn't become popular until a programmer wrote the code to work out how hard a Sudoku was, because papers were able to publish easy, medium, and hard Sudoku, and that then made people play it and enjoy it when they didn't know how hard it was, and sometimes you'd play one and it'd be nearly impossible, and other times it was too simple. That didn't allow people to choose the difficulty that they wanted to invest their time into. And that's the problem with randomness or procedurally generated content. You need to have functions that tell you whether or not what you've generated is good or not. Right? So that's the big thing with random generation, and the big thing with procedural content is, what is your function for estimating the quality of the output? Okay? And that's why I said, do some handcrafting and then randomly choose between them. Okay, I'll see if there's one last question before I go back to the last bit of fun and documentation. We have one type question coming in. Nearly there, and gave up. Okay, I'll come back to the chat in a minute. So there's a whole bunch of other things we can talk about with good, so I'm going to speed run some of this. So double blinding, so people like rock, paper, scissors, you don't play asynchronously, where I play first and then you play. Because if we were playing rock, paper, scissors, and I get to go first, and I go 1, 2, 3, rock, and you then get to choose, it's kind of, oh, wait a minute, that breaks the entire game, because it has to be symmetric, because once you know what I'm going to throw, you will always win, right? So there's this idea of blinding and simultaneous actions. Diplomacy, if you haven't played it, is about simultaneous mechanics and backstabbing your friends. Don't play it. They say don't play with your friends because you have to backstab them to win. That was the doubling and halving. Colleague slash friend of mine, Ernest Adams, he always thinks of what's the economy of the game. So how in your game does the player earn resources, and how do they spend resources? And that may be like equivalents of cash or game coins, but it could also be trophies or reputation or points. So that's the economy is earning them, spending them, and why does she want more of them? And that can lead to discussions on micropayment models and things. There is a danger to auto balancing, and I see this one comes up quite often. People think that games should be better at creating the appropriate level of difficulty, and so they auto balance. The problem of auto balance without letting the player know, right? So without having a clear indicator of what current level you're at, the problem of hidden auto balance is that it ends up that I'm always going to win 50% of the games. No matter how good I am at the game or how bad I am at the game, I'll always win 50% of games, because if I get better, I'll win a couple more, and then I'll be up in more difficulty, and I'll still be winning exactly 50 games. And if I don't have that anchor to what my current skill level is, it would remove the motivation to keep going, because the goalposts are constantly shifting, and the game, every time you get better at the game just gets too hard. And it's kind of, well, if I know I'm always going to win 50% of the time and lose 50% of the time, well, I can't see my progress. And that's why you see with Clash Royale, you have that, what is your level, right? And it's the level and ELO levels and things. It's knowing your level. So yes, you're going to win about 50% of the games, but if you can win 60% of the games, your ELO is going to keep going up, and you can go, oh, I'm rated this high. And so although I'm always winning 50 games, I've got a way of measuring that balance, and it's not automatically doing it. It's doing it by raising some stat about me to put me in a different category of play, right? And that's something I understand and can see. If you do things that are hidden to the player, they will generally dislike that once they find out. Puzzles versus choice. Puzzles have a right answer. Choices don't necessarily have the right answer. And puzzles generally don't have replayability, because once you've solved them, when you present the same puzzle, you just use the same solution. So we talk about good puzzles, we talk about jigsaw puzzles versus games. So jigsaw puzzles tend to have this very low difficulty when you're finding the edges, and then they get they raise up in difficulty as you start filling things in, and then you generally kind of stay a reasonably level difficulty, and it kind of peaks a little bit as you get the ones that were hard to place and you didn't immediately know where they were, and then suddenly you've got so few gaps that you start to find things quickly, right? And so the end tends to be very easy of a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle. Whereas games, we tend to have this movement where as you progress, it gets slightly harder, and then we make it easier again, and then it gets slightly harder, and then we make it easier again. So we usually introduce new skills at each one of these bumps, and then we make it a bit easier. So once you've learnt that new skill, we then make it easier so you can practice that new skill, get better at it, use it in unfamiliar ways, and then ramp up the difficulty until you can beat the boss, and then come back down and make that easier again, right? So there's this crescendo up and down pacing. Parallelism is a Jesse Shell thing around avoiding bottlenecks, so people don't get stuck at one area and there's no way they can progress. And there's a whole bunch of puzzles and puzzles hiding as choices. Tech trees sometimes look like they're choices, but in fact they're just a puzzle because there is a right answer, you just don't know it, which is super annoying, right? Because for sometimes you know that there is a best way through the tech tree, it's just you don't know what it is, and you're tempted to go to game playthroughs or fan sites and look at the analysis, but then it becomes it's not interesting anymore because I'm not having to make interesting choices because there is a best thing to use at level 1, there's a best thing to invest in at level 2, there's a best thing to invest in at level 3, and if I want to be best at the game, I'm just supposed to follow the best path through the tech tree, right? That devalues the choice in your game because it is a puzzle hiding as choice. We can also look at those procedural puzzles, some that give you partial answers. Don't worry, I'm not assessing this, I'm just trying to give you these ideas for as you're now working on the games. So the last thing is we'll talk about different types of fun. I use a self-determination theory model for analysing games, and that talks about relatedness, competence and agency. I also use curiosity and creativity as additional aspects. So one of the framings talks about people fun, hard fun, easy fun and serious fun. People fun tends to be the relatedness, the connection to other people doing something that matters. Hard fun is that you're doing something which you feel good when you succeed at doing something difficult, right? And so that's what's considered sort of that hard, I've got to get good at this to win. Easy fun tends to be the sort of curiosity and exploration and creativity side of fun activities. And the serious fun tends to be that agency. I'm making choices that matter, right? So the choice I make is serious. And so you can kind of look at some of these framings of what kinds of fun things are and attach them to other psychological theories. Okay, so for this year, and I've got the wrong link there, sorry, but it is this course, so you should be able to find the 2025 version, which is the game design document for this course. And so if we go into that, and I actually changed that to being the right year because I didn't update that. So let's update that to 2025 and away. Thought I had. Where are we? Why am I? Oh. There we go. 2025. And you should be able to find in the documentation, there is the documentation link. And I've added the game pitching in there, and you've got this game design document. Now this game design template is the idea of a way of documenting your game, and so the reason why I want you to fill this in is so that you are sharing with each other what your game concept is. So you've already had that pitch. Now what you need to be doing is filling in this documentation with the game design. Some of you can start programming if you really want to start programming early and start testing some ideas and start developing things, but it's very useful to go through this exercise and make sure everybody is on the same page about what is going to be developed. So I'd expect you all... Yep.
I don't think people see the document you're referring to right now. We just have like the 4 keys of fun, and then it's kind of like down on the people stuff.
Right, I thought that would have moved. Okay, I will go back to the... it is easier when I'm in the office rather than away from the office. So let's go to there and change stream, entire screen. Let's just try and share the entire screen to make sure that I'm sharing the entire screen. and then go back to there. Can you see this?
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, cool. Okay, so what I was saying is that we have this document in the course IMT 3601 / IMT 3603 rather 2025. So within the 2025 version, there's documentation. Within the documentation, there is the game design. I would like each of you to have taken this game design template and put it into the root directory of your repository, and put it into main so that it is in the main. So that's where people first arrive. That they'll be able to see what the design of the game is. Now you could put it in a documentation folder if you want documentation folder rather than the root, but I do want it like clearly labeled and near the top so people can go and have a look at it, so that I can have a look at it. The idea of what is the flow of the game, how does the player move through the game, what are the levels, what are the progression, that sort of thing. We want that basic look and feel. What are the mechanics? What does the player do? What are the core gameplay? What are the interactions? Game progression. How does the player progress the experience? And how do you know they? How do they know they're making progress? So, what is the indication? What is the sense of moving forward? So go through and ask those questions of you, and ask you to fill in those and start at least thinking about them. Now, not every game will fill in every element of this, right? So some of it might not be relevant to your game. That's fine. This is just a checklist to get you thinking about these things, documenting them so that you are able to work together, right? So when we look at the documentation, we have the purpose of game design, and so we look at this idea of the reason for it is to have the memory of those hundreds of decisions you've made about the game recorded somewhere so they don't get forgotten. And it's an effective way to communicate between all the team members. There tends to be multiple game design documents. So there's a standard game design overview, right, which is short, manageable, just basically what is the game, it's what you've done for your pitches. There's a detailed design document, which is that template in the thing. You could also go and find other templates for game design documents and say, oh, actually this template fits my game design thoughts better, so I want to use this one. You don't have to use the one I'm providing. I just want you to have a good game design document, right? And that's one you could use if you want to. And in the game design document, there also needs to be that technical description and discussion around what the technology is that you're using. A story overview, if you have stories, right? So that's, some games like Tetris doesn't really have a story, and so you tend not to have a story bible or a story overview. I expect there to be technical documents. So there may well be a technical document that discusses how you're doing networking, or discusses some of the technical aspects of the pipeline of your assets, for example, or the kind of graphics you're aiming for, or the frame rate you're aiming for, these sorts of technical issues. You can have pipeline overview, which is do's and don'ts for your art team. What should assets, so there should be some kind of what are the assets in the game, where should they be, and what are they named, right? Because if you have that documented, then people know what's missing. And if you have a checklist that they can go through and say, yep, I've done this, and I've done this, and I've done this, and they can check those off and verify that they're in the repo, then you've got that pipeline for generating content and making sure you don't miss things. Also look at some, in the technical documentation, this idea of system limitations. What is the maximum number of polygons on screen at once, or maximum messages, or maximum concurrent animation? Think about what you're targeting, what you're trying to get to, what are you limiting the game so that you know what, when you test it, what will be the minimum specs for playability. Though the aesthetic documents, so what are the core, the core look and feel of the game, right? So this is where now, you know, some lecturers will say, oh no, you like don't grab images off the internet because that could be copyright infringement, and the game industry is, hell no, you just grab everything and you put it in your concept art diary. That is concept art. You're not publishing it. You're not giving it to third parties. You are not publishing it online. You're not putting it in a public repo. You are just using this art as your own inspiration. Right? So often they will have art from all over, other games, other artists, online stuff, everything. No, copyright permission to show Batman in their art Bible, right? And say, we want a bad guy that's kind of like Batman. Here are some images of the Batman we mean, right? So it's not the 1960s bright purple wearing, fairly effete Batman. We want the Val Kilmer grimier Batman, right? So so don't get hung up on any of that intellectual property stuff, because these are internal documents, and as they're internal documents, do not publish them, because if you publish them and you've got all that art content that isn't copyright approved, you then have breached the use and publishing of copyrighted material, right? So use it in-house. For your art Bible, you would have all of your arts assets stored in a location, and you have some of the rules about what they're supposed to look like, what size they're supposed to be. Where is the origin? Is the origin at the center of the feet, or is the origin at the left-hand corner of the sprite, or is the origin in the center of the torso? Right? So where is the origin of the images you're going to display? What is the scale of the 3D models? Do the textures get embedded in the model, or do they come as a separate texture file that is then referenced by the model? These kind of rules for the art Bible are important for what things look like, and also some of those rules about how they're to be implemented. And the aesthetics, look and feel. What are you trying to achieve? Right? That should be in that art Bible. We also think of games as having management documents. So one of the things that I think is interesting for you to do at this stage is to start thinking about budgets. Right? So you're in your kind of last year of university. Most of you will go out into industry to work. There may not be many jobs available for you, and so you might have to make your own business in June, July next year. And so you need to understand how to budget a game release, and what the time estimates and the income you need to get, and what the break-even points are, and actually write a budget for how much is this costing you, both in your time and potentially in assets. And once you start looking at your time as valuable, you then start saying, well, we need 10,000 kroner to buy this thing because it will save us 20,000 kroner worth of time. Right? So you need to start thinking about those. And and again, the budget I'm not going to grade, but if you want feedback on your game budget, because you are thinking of starting your own company, then absolutely start putting that stuff in, because we can then give you feedback on it. I'm not going to grade you on it, but I can give you feedback to help you get better at that part of the industry. The budget does evolve over the project lifespan. A project schedule. So we now have basically what we start doing at this point is saying, right, we've started designing the game, we've started implementing some stuff, we've started thinking about it. Let's go to the end of the project and say, right, 15th of December, let's work backwards from there and work out how much resource we have and when we have that resource available. And let's make a plan, a weekly plan of how much we're going to achieve, working both forward from where we are and also backwards from the 15th of December, and start moving it back towards us to say, well, what are we going to do in that week? Oh, we've got some exams here, we've got some exams here, so we're going to have downtime there, so we need to get to this level because we've only got a week to polish it there. So start thinking at this stage about planning through to the end of the project. It's also really important for you to write down now your estimates of how long things will take. You cannot get better at estimating the duration of things unless you commit now to your guess of how long things are going to take. Because if you guess now, when they take longer than you guessed, you have to think, okay, I look in my book and I said it was going to take a day to do this, and it's 5 days, and I've been working constantly for 5 days. I have to correct that estimate. I have to think, how do I make sure next time when I have to try and estimate something, I'm able to say it's going to be 5 to 7 days rather than 1 day, right? Because unfortunately what happens in your brain, if you don't write it down, your brain will retcon reality to go, oh, hey, I always thought it was going to take 5 days, right? Because your brain wants you to be right about stuff, and so it will whisper to you that you were right even when you're wrong. So you need to document that so you can tell your brain, no brain, I was wrong, I need to fix this, right? So I need you to write those. There's a group of writing documents, and that includes the stories and scripts and tutorials and manuals, right, for the player. Now, given that you're not going to be necessarily able to implement an entire full game, I expect there'll be at least some form of tutorial, because you need to get the player near the start of the game to be able to get into it, and then you can try and do a wee bit of a vertical slice and have some hard levels. But I would still want you to have some level of, what does the introduction to this game look like? How do we plan out the intro to the game? Because that is the first impression of your players. That often determines how long they're going to stay and whether they're going to keep playing. So the game tutorial and intros and explanation to the player become critical in understanding your game. A story Bible is this idea of what are the technical challenges that lead to a change in the story. Artists with visual ideas, sometimes can be better than the writers for shaping the story. The story will integrate with the art, the technology, and the gameplay. So you need to have, if you're going to have story, you need to have a document where what you're doing links into the story. So it's not just something that is placed on top of your other gameplay. It's, how does this mechanic align with the story we have, right? If you don't have a story, you don't have to worry about the alignment. But if you do have a story, you want to be able to think, how is this progressing the story? How does this align with the story? Is this the right thing for this character to be doing? And then we have public documents, where we have website documents, and one of the things often people do, we start looking at claiming the domain for their game and the trademarks for their games, and so you then start putting up a web page. It would be perfectly reasonable for some of you in this course to have a dev blog and put up a web page and say, hey, we're making this game, here's our dev blog, right? And then you might get some input from externals who are interested in following your progress in making this game. That can be very motivating. It also gives you some testers to test your game as it progresses, right? So if you want to do that sort of thing, that's entirely up to you. Again, you don't have to create the public documents. You are required to create the game design document of some kind, but you don't have to create a public website. It's just a useful thing to do if you want to engage with people who want to see you making this game. Right? And you do some video presentations. People, there's Kickstarter, which still exists, generating some hype documents, generating some player-based documents around the game. More and more in modern game development, this management, this community manager role, the management of your game community becomes critical to success of your game. If you haven't built a community while developing the game, you release the game, no one knows it's there, and it flops. Right? You need to build visibility, and part of that is these kind of documents where you start creating interest in what you're doing. Right? It is not the case that you can just build an amazing game and then people will buy it. You need to build the community around the game as well. In large game development, we also have the walkthroughs. Right? Now, to some extent, what I'm actually wanting on the 15th of December is I want you to give me a playthrough. Right? I want you to have a video that gives me a playthrough of what you've created. And that's actually very much like a game walkthrough of, someone playing through the game. Okay? There are some people who hate the existence of game walkthroughs, and some people who really like them. Sometimes your players will make them, sometimes you have to make them for the players. The player documented manuals, I know many of them don't read them, but they are useful for some players, and in the age of AI, again, this is what we're in, the manual of how to do things is something that the AI will look over and then suggest to the player. So one of the things you can do with your manual is you write your player manual and then you test that manual on AIs to see what they pick up from the manual when you ask them some bog standard player questions. Okay? And if the AI using your manual can't give the right answer, then you update your manual to make it clearer. Right? Because you know that some reasonably high proportion of your players, probably more than 50%, won't look at your manual, but they might ask AI to help them in the game. Right? And that AI, if it's got access to your manual, will give them better answers, and therefore they'll be able to progress in your game. Therefore, they will think it's more fun. Right? So that writing it to understand that how your players will be accessing information is a critical part of designing the manuals and fostering your community. The last thing there is around fan fiction and supporting community devs and community mods and community moderators, doing all of those things to encourage that building of a community around your game, which is well beyond what the individual activities of the game are, but are that extension to make the game profitable and valuable. Okay, so the core documents I need you to create are the design document and the technical document. Those are the core. I need to see those. These others, the aesthetic document, useful if you've got a lot of visuals in your game, not essential, and I won't be grading it. Your management documents, I will look at your management documents, so you also need those. So think of this: you need design, you need technical, and you need management material. Management material, I will also look at your commits in your Git. For some of your documenting of your work and your documenting of your progress, I'm quite happy for you to upload your commit history into an AI and get it to give a summary of what was committed and why, and who was doing the commits, and have it write that, and then have you check that and go, oh, yeah, we did that, we did it, no, it's lied there, and oh, yeah, no, that's fine, and no, it's lied there. Clean that up, and then submit that as documentation, right? I don't expect you to manually trawl through everything to try and generate some of that documentation of progress, right? But design, technical, management, writing documents, you don't need those, but think if you are writing a story, a heavy game, you need some documents there. these public documents, you don't need them unless you are actively going to work and choosing to build a community. Now, and you don't need the player documentation at this stage, though doing a walkthrough is that video of your gameplay so that I get to see what you've actually made. Now, some of you are asking about what the grading criteria look like and more detail about how the course is going to be assessed. And if I break that out of there, if you have a look, oh, no, it is actually there in 2025. So we have the submission, right, which tells you about how the submission works, and that I want the repos, the videos, the group discussion, what I want around the individual good and bad code that you'll be submitting. So you'll have a video and you also have an individual discussion and a personal reflection. We look at the grading, will link to the gameplay video and a code video. So the gameplay video is that kind of walkthrough. A code video is you describing code that is hard to see in the text of code bases. I need you to analyze the good code you've written and the bad code you've written and tell me about those and explain why they're good or bad, right? So this is a reflection on what you did well when you were developing the game and what sneaked through, and your bad code can be code that you have refactored. So if it's code you've written that you went, oh my god, that's really bad code, and you've gone back and you fixed it, point me to the commit where the bad code is in the project. Now by bad code, I don't mean non-functional code. Bad code is code that works but does that badly, right? That isn't implemented well, even if it's working, right? So I'm not thinking bad code as in faulty code. I'm thinking bad code as in code that works that's badly written. We have grading on the development process and on your reflection. Now, this is my first draft of these categories. What I want you to think about is what other things you would, is this a reasonable way of grading it? Do you like this way of grading it? This rubric weighting approach means there's a default of 10, 10, 20, 20, 20, 20, but you can up some of these to increase the weight to 30, 30, 10, 10 if you want your code review to be 60% and your documentation and reflection to shrink down to only being 10% each, right? So this gives you some of that flexibility. I am very interested in getting feedback and discussing with you, is this the right way of doing it, right? We've currently got an opinion on using videos to verify that you are human beings and are doing this work. And here in New Zealand, I'm using a multiplier on that so that you claim your level of knowledge and what you made with the game, and then your videos and your personal interviews with me are about validating the work that you did. So if you did great work and you're going to get an A and you do a satisfactory oral, you get the A because that's the quality work you did and you validated that it was you in the exam. If, however, you present A quality work and in the exam it feels like you don't understand anything you've submitted, then we might modify that and say, well, the game was going to be A, but you only showed that you understood 75% of this, and so that brings that high mark down to a C, because you've only been able to show that you understand at a C level, even though the game is operating at an A level. Now, That's a discussion for us to have, right, about how that final grading is done. Right? I do not want to tell you exactly how you're going to be assessed. I want us to have that discussion and for us to work together as a group to work out what is motivating for you. Right? How do we use the assessment as a tool to help motivate you to do fun and interesting things and learn what you want to learn, so that when you leave, you have the tools you need to create your own games, get into game companies, understand how games work, and understanding your role in games. Okay? So this is a draft, not the final, and the class will work on working out what that final should be. Okay? I'm also interested in you telling me what parts of the code you've worked on. Now I've got this wee sheet that talks about how you can claim you did all of some part of the code, some file, most of it, half of it, some of it, or you just touched it in an important way that was significant for the game. And then if someone claims all, then other people can only claim touched. If someone picks most, then other people can say they did some of the code, any number, and anyone can say they touched it, but you can't have someone saying I did most of it and another person saying I did half of it, because those two people haven't coordinated what they did. Right? Two of you can both say, if it, up to the number of people you claim half is 2, so you can have, if one person claims half, one other person can claim half, right? So I was trying to work out what are the ways in which these combine, so that you think, okay, how much of this have I worked on? What bits am I claiming as I contributed in this way to this part of the project? More and more now, we expect that code, some of the code will come in from AI. If you understand and are claiming it, I expect you to understand why it's there and how it works. If you don't claim it and just say, hey, there's a block of code here, we got AI to do that bit of the code, don't worry about it, it just works. This is the bit that I'm claiming that I understand and I know, that's fine. Right? You don't need to get perfect coverage of all the code and make sure that you claim 100% of every bit of code, because some of it you might not understand, and if there's code in bits you don't understand, then I'm not going to look at that, because you've not claimed it as something you know and something you contributed. You've labeled it as, oh, AI did that, or you've just left it unlabeled. And unlabeled code, I will assume, came in from a template, came in from Reddit, came in from AI, came in from your uncle. Just, I don't know how it got there. If you don't understand it and you don't want me looking at it and potentially asking you questions about it, then you don't claim it. Okay, so does that make sense? Are you willing to have that discussion? Okay, so we actually have, what do we do if the group is below the intended minimum number of members? Use AI to fill in the roles. And also you multicast, right? So if there's 2 of you, you pick 3 roles each. One of you is a bear, one of you is a wolf, right? Don't muddle those up. And then one of you is the cat and one of you is the puppy. Don't muddle those 2 up. And then allocate the owl and the rabbit independently. But you know, so you can multi-class, right? And so you take on those responsibility down to a group of 2. If you're a group of 1, then you're kind of doing every role, which means you're kind of an alien that does everything. But below that, yeah, just take so just take those roles and fill them in. And you know, if you need an AI that can play a role of communication, then we actually have some GPTSs that use the 6 animal model to give you feedback. Okay, so how would that work if the group members have divided their work, like someone has focused on design and someone else has focused on code? Then you tell me that's what you're focusing on, we look at the rubric and we look at the assessment and go, right, what is right for you? And those are the defaults, which give you a good default to work from. If you divide up the task more than that, then we can discuss it. If you have someone entirely on design, it doesn't really feel like you're then making a game programming course. So I would prefer you not to allocate someone entirely to design. I would like to see all of you doing some of the coding. And that means all of you should understand some of the coding, right? So you can say that you touched or did some of the code, and then I can ask you coding questions, okay? Because this is a coding course and I want you to do some coding. Now, you can absolutely spend more time on design than other people do. If that's your passion and that's what you want to end up with out of the degree, that's okay. You still have to have a little bit of coding in there for me to feel comfortable saying that this is a game programming qualification. Can I say something about the current status for group formation? For the groups final now, are we waiting for more people to join? How about the groups with few people? Are they able to join? Okay, so there are groups of 2, right? In the past, I've not allowed groups of 2 because we felt it was too small. My mind has been changed by the fact that you can use AI to fill those up. If there is a group of 2 who have been listed as a group of 2, then and they say, look, actually we don't want to work as a group of 2, we would rather join in with another group, I'm happy to still do that, but at this point it becomes a discussion that we do with the groups as we merge them, rather than me just changing groups and saying, right, this is the way it is. Okay, so the group status is you are now in charge of agreeing with me placing more people in your group or with merging groups. Okay, so I would like, and I'm willing for these to be the final groups that are there. People who haven't been allocated to a group need to absolutely email me and discuss that, and Discord bump me as well. So do both Discord and email and work out what group we're going to put you in. Okay, so you got some question related to evaluation. Should the main point be to make a real game that delivers and learn on the way? Or shouldn't the main point be to make a real game that delivers and then learn along the way? Actually, no. That is not the point of this course. The point is to learn. So if you have to make a choice between the game and learning, you choose learning. Right? So no, I disagree. The main point is not to make a real game and then learn something while doing that. It is to learn while making a game. So the learning wins. If someone was really bad at learning, but did their absolute best and somehow made it work, should the person who made something good be punished with a worse grade for not knowing all? Okay, so bad at learning, but did their absolute best and somehow made it work, should that person be who made something good be punished? Interesting. You consider a grade as a punishment. If I grade them as a C based on the fact that they don't understand what they did, then no, I don't consider that a punishment. I consider a reflection of their abilities. My goal is to try and give a justifiable statement of your abilities. So if an employer came to me and said, why did you give this person a B? I can say, well, they did this really well and they did this really well. And if they said, why did you give this person a C? They're much better than that. I can go, well, this is why I gave them a C, right? I want to give you grades that I would justify to an external, right? And I don't think your concern, is likely to end up actually being a problem, because almost everybody who makes things succeed in game development understands what they did, right? And I just smashed my head against the keyboard until the code started working usually doesn't work, right? You usually actually need to be working on things and moving towards them, particularly with game systems which become complex. Or the other way around, the person who's really good at learning and learns a lot but makes really crappy game mechanics, should they be punished for with a lower grade? Actually, if we take it the other way, I'm more likely to give the person who learnt a lot a reasonable grade, right? If the game you ended up with is a bit crappy, but oh my god, you learnt a lot, you understand everything you did, you understand why it didn't work, you understand what you'd do better the next time, you have a deep understanding of game development, having gone through the process, then yeah, I'm actually probably more likely to give that person a higher grade, because they are more useful in the future than the person who lucked into it just working and has no idea what's going on. I'm not punishing the person, I'm giving them an accurate reflection of the grade I believe they should get. We need an hour and a puppy for our rogue-like pixel game, if anybody's interested. Okay, so we got people pitching for people to join. I got the jizz of the 3 paragraphs from the first paragraph. 3 paragraphs from the first paragraph you said times 3. Learning focus good, game perfection not so important. Oh good, okay, that's great. Thanks Colton. So that's all fine. Okay, so do we have any other questions? Otherwise it's breaking into your groups, and I don't know if I've created names for everyone. If I haven't created a named group for you, tell me, jump in your groups, go and start discussing things. If you have questions for me that aren't sort of public group questions, yeah, stay online for a bit and ask me some questions. Otherwise, it's going away and starting designing some of these games, grabbing the document, start discussing the document, start adding things to it, start organizing your Git repo, start organizing when you work well together, all those sorts of things. Okay, so it's now about group formation and working. If you are in a group of 2 and you think, oh, I'm not sure about this, then we can start negotiating and pulling you into other groups. And absolutely, if some of you don't have a group at all, then you need to be harassing me to put you into a group. Okay? Right, so I'll stop screen sharing. And stop streaming and stop recording.